Germany, with its gloomy forests and mist-shrouded Gothic castles, has long been the cradle of chilling legends. The rolling hills, seemingly idyllic, hide dark secrets, where one feels watched by unseen eyes from the thicket. "Something's not right here," a guard once whispered to his comrade, his breath trembling in the cold night. German folklore, with its characteristic gloom, has nurtured tales of witches, monsters, and beings disguised as human, but possessing the nature of beast. It was in the darkness of these forests that the Brothers Grimm wrote their timeless tales, where evil always lurks in the form of a cunning wolf. But not just wolves. They could be anything: a man with a friendly smile, a shadow flitting through the night, or a growl echoing from the void. "Watch out, don't go alone," a veteran sergeant once warned, his hand gripping his rifle as if it could protect him from something not of this world. Tales of deception, of creatures disguising themselves to hunt, have seeped into the German psyche for centuries. Fear of wolves wasn't just a childhood phobia. In the Middle Ages, the people of Germany saw them as embodiments of the devil, of untamable cruelty. A story from 1865 in Ansbach tells of a wolf captured by villagers. They didn't just kill it, they dressed it in human clothes, forced it upright like a criminal, and hanged it before the crowd. This bizarre act wasn't just punishment, but a ritual to banish the fear that the line between human and beast could be blurred. "It's not a wolf," an old villager whispered. "It's something else. Something wearing a wolf's skin." In folklore, evil often takes the form of a wolf, but it doesn't stop there. They can shapeshift, donning human form to hide their bloodthirsty nature. Stories like the werewolf of Andernach or the white wolf of the Harz Mountains tell of cursed men who become beasts under the moonlight. They live among the villagers, laughing and talking like anyone else. But when night falls, they shed their human skin to reveal claws and fangs. "I saw him," a hunter recounted, his eyes still wide with panic. "He looked at me, but those eyes weren't human." But are these stories truly just products of imagination? Are they merely how ancient people explained the inexplicable? I've spent decades researching and realized these legends don't just exist on paper. For the past 40 years, military personnel stationed in Germany, men trained to face war and death, have returned with stories that make even me shudder. They don't talk about ordinary wolves. They speak of something larger, more intelligent, and more terrifying. "It knew I was there," one veteran whispered, his voice cracking. "It wanted me to know it was watching." These creatures lack a fixed form. Sometimes a silent human figure standing under the moonlight, other times a beast with glowing red eyes. Due to their unpredictability, I call them shapeshifters, a term both simple and encompassing the horror. The Germans call them Aufhaker, an entity that leaps onto its victim's back, weighing them down until their last breath is choked out. In neighboring Poland, the Kurai refer to them by a name similar to Skinwalker, a creature from Native American culture capable of mimicking human voices to lure victims. Listen carefully, I once warned in a lecture, if you hear a loved one calling your name in the forest, don't answer. It might not be them. At military bases in Germany, stories began to spread in the darkness, whispered around campfires or during cold night watches. They called them smoke pit sessions, gatherings where soldiers shared unexplainable experiences. One report that haunts me most came from a sergeant at Baumholder Base. There were claw marks on the generator, he wrote in his report, his voice trembling as he recounted it. Not a bear, not a wolf. It was too big, and it knew we were there. The deep gashes, as if carved by a razor-sharp blade, were the only remaining evidence. Sergeant Schaefer, how's the repair coming along? Did you handle it?" A soldier's call echoed in the night, but Schaefer didn't answer. He stood frozen by the generator, eyes glued to the darkness beyond. A strange sound, half growl, half hiss, came from the trees. "Someone. He's out there," Schaefer whispered, gripping a wrench like a weapon. His comrade approached, but when the flashlight beam swept across, the only thing they saw was a pair of fleeting eyes, glowing like embers, then vanishing. That night, no one dared leave the guard post alone. I couldn't help but think of the off-hawker, the stalker, the predator, the one who never leaves clear tracks. "Reporting, Sergeant, it can't be fixed." Cadet Schaefer's voice cracked, his eyes wide with panic as he stood before the sergeant in the dim twilight of the base. "The generator. It's destroyed, sir. You need to see it for yourself." "Destroyed? What do you mean?" The sergeant narrowed his eyes, his voice lowering as if trying to suppress suspicion. "Destroyed by what?" "Be specific, Schaefer." Schaefer swallowed hard, sweat dotting his forehead despite the biting cold night. I'm not sure, Sergeant. It looks like it was clawed apart. Maybe a wild animal, but the scratches are too deep, too unusual. Not like any animal I've ever seen. It's like something intentionally broke it. He paused, his gaze darting towards the distant darkness, where the dense forest whispered strange sounds. "Wild animal? Are you sure?" The sergeant crossed his arms, his voice laced with skepticism. "So, bottom line, it can't be fixed?" I had heard similar stories from other servicemen. Inexplicable scratches like the mark of an entity not of this world. "Yes, Sergeant." "The damage is too severe. Can't be repaired on site," Schaefer replied, his voice trembling. He could still see the image of the sharp gashes as if carved by the claws of a legendary monster. I think we shouldn't stay here long." The sergeant sighed, his sharp eyes sweeping over Schaefer. "All right, report it to command immediately. Post guards at the bunker entrance and request a new generator. Absolutely no one goes down there alone, understood?" He paused, his voice dropping. "And Schaefer, don't let me hear you spreading wild stories about this. Get back to training." "Yes, Sergeant," Schaefer replied, but fear had taken root in his heart. As he turned to leave, he didn't dare look back at the darkness behind him, where a dry, scraping sound like claws on metal echoed again. Schaefer wasn't the first, and wouldn't be the last, to confront whatever lurked in the shadows of German military bases. The next story was shared by Adolf Schaffer himself, a seasoned scholar researching supernatural phenomena. Schaffer, a Bundeswehr veteran, sent a letter with trembling handwriting, as if the horrifying memory still clung to him. "I'm not easily frightened," he wrote, but I could feel the tremor in every word. Schaefer recounted that the incident occurred when he was a cadet, training at a remote base in East Germany, a land once divided by the Iron Curtain, where the air still felt heavy with the Cold War. His mention of East Germany confused me. A faulty memory or a more recent event? Perhaps, as I speculated, time in Schaefer's mind had been distorted by the horror he experienced, like an indelible curse. "When it happened, I was training in East Germany," Schaefer wrote. One late afternoon around 5 p.m., as sunset painted the horizon red, the base suddenly lost power. This wasn't normal, he recounted. The grid had just been checked a few days before. "I heard whispering like voices echoing from the nearby water building. A few comrades heard it too, but we thought it was just the wind." I knew well, the first signs of the off-hawker are often dismissed, like warnings from the unseen realm. By 8 p.m. the power flickered again, lights blinking like weak breaths. The drill sergeant, a stern man with eyes sharp as knives, ordered, "Schaefer, take 3 others down to the basement. Fix the generator now." Schaefer nodded, but a sense of unease began to rise within him, as if something was lurking in the darkness. Along with 3 comrades, Schaefer descended into the damp basement, the air thick with the smell of oil and metal. Weak flashlight beams swept across stained concrete walls, creating distorted shadows that seemed to move. "Careful," a comrade whispered, his voice trembling. They checked the first generator and still working. The second was also fine, but as they approached the third generator, the air suddenly became oppressive, as if the darkness was tightening its grip on them. "Oh my God," Schaefer whispered as the flashlight beam hit the main generator. The massive metal block, built to withstand bombardment, was now riddled with deep claw marks. Sharp cuts sliced through the steel like a hot knife through butter, exposing torn wiring and shattered battery components. "Impossible," a comrade backed away, his voice panicked. What could do this? I recognized the signs of the Aufhaker, the shapeshifter of German legend. The scratches weren't just physical marks, they felt like a message, a warning from something watching. Schaefer felt the hair on his neck stand up, as if unseen eyes were tracking him from a dark corner. "We have to get up there now!" he yelled, bolting up the stairs, heart pounding. When reporting back to the sergeant, he didn't dare tell the whole truth, that he heard a low growl like the laughter of an unearthly entity, echoing from the darkness. Schaefer had seen something humans weren't meant to see, and it had chosen him as a witness. "Report it to command immediately," the sergeant ordered, his voice chillingly calm. "Post guards at the bunker door and request a new generator." "Move fast, Schaefer." He patted him lightly on the back, but his eyes avoided contact, as if trying to hide a terrible secret. "Good job, cadet." But his indifference couldn't soothe the fear constricting Schaefer's heart. The sergeant's attitude was more frightening than the scratches on the generator. It was as if he knew something, a truth that Schaefer, in his cadet naivety, couldn't yet grasp. I couldn't help but shudder hearing whispers from other veterans. Senior officers sometimes chose silence in the face of inexplicable phenomena, as a way to protect themselves from the truth. They know, but they don't dare speak. In Schaefer's mind, theories swirled. Best case, a saboteur was running rampant on base, a human with sharp tools and malicious intent. But worst case? He didn't dare think further. The idea of something inhuman, with the strength to tear steel like paper, made his blood run cold. "Impossible," he muttered, trying to convince himself he was imagining things. But deep down, he knew the truth was more terrifying than any nightmare. As the sun set, darkness swallowed the base. The air in the barracks felt heavy, as if the darkness itself was breathing. The cadets returned to their bunks, but no one joked or laughed as usual. Schaefer lay down, eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying to banish the image of the sharp scratches. Sleep came, but it wasn't peaceful. It was an abyss filled with invisible whispers and watchful eyes from the shadows. "At some point during the night, I woke up," Schaefer recounted, his voice trembling as he wrote to me. "The scratching sound came again, but not from the basement. It was right here. Right in our barracks." The sharp sound, like claws scraping on the wooden floor, was just a few feet from his bunk. His heart pounded, sweat breaking out despite the cold room. "Someone is there," he whispered, trying to keep his voice down so as not to wake his comrades. With the little courage he had left, Schaefer opened his eyes, scanning the pitch-black room. A shadow was rummaging in the corner like a soldier looking for something. Did someone forget to lock their footlocker, he wondered, trying to stay calm. But as his eyes swept over the other bunks, absolute terror gripped his chest. All the bunks were occupied. Every comrade was asleep. So, who was that shadow, or what was it? "Wait, what the hell is this?" Schaefer mumbled, his voice trailing off. As if hearing him, the shadow abruptly stopped. Then, with a stiff, unnatural movement, it turned its head towards him. In the faint moonlight filtering through the window, Schaefer saw clearly the pale gray skin, shiny like a corpse's. Its face had no nose, just a horrifying void like an unfinished painting. But the eyes? Oh, the empty eyes, burning with an ancient hostility, as if it had existed before mankind. Its claws were long, black, sharp as razors, glinting in the moonlight. Its body was gaunt, emaciated like a walking skeleton, but it stood taller than Schaefer, who was already 6 feet tall, by at least 2 feet. It stood there, distorted, like an insult to creation, an entity not of this world. "God, what are you?" Schaefer wanted to scream, but his throat felt constricted. Aufhaker, there was no doubt. It had chosen Schaefer as its prey. Under the monster's empty gaze, Schaefer felt his body paralyze. He couldn't move, couldn't scream, only drown in absolute terror. Seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into hours, as if time had stopped in its presence. "It knew I was watching," Schaefer wrote, "and it liked it, as if it was savoring my fear." Somewhere in the darkness, a scratching sound echoed again, a reminder that the monster hadn't left, Finally, darkness consumed Schaefer. The absolute horror, like an invisible hand squeezing his mind, caused him to pass out. The last image he remembered was the monster's empty eyes, glowing like embers, as if sucking his soul dry. "I thought I was dead," he wrote to me, or worse, that he had been dragged by it to a place no one should ever go. When he came to, Schaefer found himself lying in his bunk, the faint light of dawn filtering through the window. His comrades and the sergeant stood around him, their faces a mixture of concern and a strange detachment. "Are you okay, Schaefer?" the sergeant asked, but his voice was cold, as if trying to distance himself from something he himself didn't want to face. A comrade whispered, "You look like a vampire just drained you dry." Schaefer felt exactly like that. His body ached as if all his life force had been drained overnight. An empty, cold feeling clung to him, as if the thing hadn't just appeared but had left its mark on his soul. "I never told anyone but you, Professor Ethan," he wrote, "because I was afraid they'd think I was crazy. But I swear I've never been so terrified in my entire military career." The image of the monster, with its pale gray skin, black claws, and hostile eyes, haunted him every second, like an indelible curse. As an expert in supernatural phenomena and a former Marine, I understand that boot camp can be a strange place at night. Psychological pressure, sleep deprivation, and unfamiliar surroundings can make the mind play tricks. I've seen recruits cry out in their sleep or wake up screaming into the darkness, as if seeing things that weren't there. But Schaefer's story isn't like typical hallucinations. It carries the scent of the Aufhaker, an entity from German legend, a hunter of fear that leaves its victims in a state of utter exhaustion. I remember nights in my own boot camp, the cold concrete floor, the moans of exhausted recruits, and the inexplicable noises in the dark. Once I was woken by a red flashlight beam and the DIs yelled, "Hey, Firewatch!" But when I think of Schaefer, another time I saw a small recruit mistakenly put CLP gun cleaner in his eye instead of eye drops, screaming like he was possessed. But that was human error. What Schaefer saw wasn't human. Another memory that chills me is of a strange guy in our platoon. During the first week of training, after lights out, I heard a bizarre noise under the bunks. Looking down, I saw a recruit crawling backward, back flat against the floor like a spider, his eyes glinting in the dark. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled. The guy just grinned, whispered, "Hi," and scurried away. The next day I couldn't find him in the platoon. Maybe exhaustion, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. Like Schaefer, I had sensed the presence of something not of this world. Schaefer was also awakened by noises in the barracks that night. The sound of claws scraping, not from the basement but right beside his bunk. I noticed the disturbing similarity. Entities like the Aufhaker often appear close to their victims, he wrote, as if asserting their presence. Schaefer insisted he wasn't dreaming. "I saw it, Professor," he wrote, his tone firm like a soldier facing the unbelievable. "It was as real as you and me. But I know, like many supernatural encounters, Schaefer's story is easily dismissed as a dream or a product of an exhausted mind. They'll say you were overtired and imagined it, but I believe you, Schaefer. I've seen enough to know the darkness hides things science can't yet explain. A German saying goes, 'In the deep woods, don't call the name of what you don't want to meet.' Perhaps that night, Schaefer inadvertently attracted the Aufhaker's attention, and it's still watching him from the shadows. Who among us hasn't been trapped in nightmares so real they're terrifying, where the line between reality and dream blurs, making us desperate to wake up just to escape the horror? But for Schaefer, that relief never came. I was awake, he wrote to me, but that thing was still there, in my mind like a ghost that never leaves. If it were just a dream, it couldn't explain what Schaefer and 2 other cadets witnessed in broad daylight. The generator clawed to pieces, as if a monster with claws sharper than steel had vented its fury on it. The deep gashes were undeniable physical evidence. "No animal could do this," a comrade whispered, eyes filled with panic. "This is the mark of something ancient, powerful, and hostile." While everything could be attributed to stress or hallucination, the psychological scars Schaefer carries cannot be denied. He didn't just see the monster in the dark, he felt it, a cold presence, as if it had touched his soul. "I wasn't myself after that night," he confessed. I know Schaefer's experience isn't unique. It's a piece in a larger, terrifying puzzle where military personnel across Germany confront inexplicable entities. Delving into the treasure trove of German folklore, I discovered the name Aufhaker, the Leaper, a demonic entity haunting lonely paths, ancient moss-covered bridges, and cold cemeteries under the faint moonlight. It's there, right on the border between the living world and the realm of the dead. An old man in Bavaria once told me, his voice trembling. The Aufhaker isn't just a monster, it's a master of deception, changing shape to hunt solitary souls. In folktales, the Aufhaker often appears as a giant demonic dog, fur black as night, walking eerily on its hind legs. Beware the lonely road, locals warn, for it likes to hunt those who walk alone. But it's not limited to animal form. Depending on the prey, the Aufhaker can transform into an alluring woman with a deadly smile, or a gray, reanimated corpse, freshly risen from the grave, eyes empty but full of malice. It knows how to make you lower your guard. I noted the similarities to Skinwalkers or Kitsune in other cultures. The name Aufhaker derives from its brutal method of attack. From the shadows, it leaps onto the victim's back, clinging like a hellish curse, its claws digging in, making escape impossible. It doesn't just kill, it drains the life force, leaving the victim an empty husk. Schaefer's account of feeling drained after the encounter perfectly matches this description. He didn't just see the Aufhaker, he was targeted by it. In some versions, the Aufhaker targets sinners, thieves, liars, or anyone carrying guilt in their heart. It knows who you are, a storyteller in the hearts whispered to me, and it comes to punish. This made me wonder, did Schaefer unintentionally do something to attract this entity's attention? Or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Whatever the case, the Aufhaker left its mark, not just on the generator, but on his soul. "I don't expect anyone to believe me," Schaefer wrote, "but I know what I saw. It wasn't a dream, not a hallucination. It was real, and it's still out there somewhere." Reading these lines, I felt a chill run down my spine. I know the Aufhaker isn't just folklore, it's a warning, a reminder that in the darkness of Germany things are lurking, waiting for a chance to leap onto the back of the unfortunate. Be careful when walking alone because you never know what's watching. In more terrifying versions of German folklore, the Aufhaker isn't just a life drainer. It possesses the bloodthirsty instincts of a wild beast, with razor-sharp claws and fangs ready to tear out its victim's throat. They die in agony, a storyteller in the Black Forest region whispered to me, drowned in blood, their eyes still reflecting the horror. I shuddered, thinking of Schaefer. Luckily, he was only drained of vitality, but the psychological price he paid was hardly insignificant. Schaefer's account, with the image of the noseless monster, black claws, and empty eyes, matches the description of the Aufhaker chillingly well. But I couldn't stop wondering, why would such an ancient entity stalk modern military bases? Destroying generators, appearing in barracks? What did it want? Perhaps it doesn't just hunt prey, it wants to sow fear like a warning from another realm. The question hangs in the air, like a shadow in my mind. If other stories are true, then the Aufhaker is no stranger to hunting those who work in darkness and isolation, especially military personnel. Remote bases, lonely night watches are the perfect playground for such an entity. They are vulnerable not just because of loneliness, but because they're trained to believe nothing can defeat them. The Aufhaker knows how to exploit that arrogance. Schaefer wasn't the first victim, and certainly won't be the last. We will bring you chilling stories from the battlefield. We will delve into military mysteries that will keep you glued to your screen. Please subscribe to the channel on all platforms. We promise to release new episodes and look forward to your feedback for the project's development. Join us as we step into the darkness. The next story, called The Night Stag, unfolds on a cold night at a base in Germany in the early 1980s, the height of the Cold War. Tension gripped Europe as NATO and the Soviet Union faced off across the Iron Curtain, poised for a war that could wipe out the world. Millions of soldiers were deployed, and in the gloomy forests of West Germany, 2 guards were trying to kill time to ward off the cold and an invisible fear. "Sometimes I think I should have been a pilot." One soldier named Hans broke the silence, his voice dreamy. He tilted his head back, looking at the starry sky as if wanting to escape the harsh reality of the night watch. "Flying helicopters must be cool, huh?" "You?" "Not smart enough, Carl," his comrade teased, but his voice held a hint of warmth. "Hey, have you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Got Han Solo, Connery, and those Nazis too." "Stop! Don't spoil it!" Hans laughed, holding up a hand. "Let me take my wife to see it when this rotation ends." "Is it good, though?" The small talk helped them forget the surrounding darkness, but only for a moment. A dry snap, like a twig breaking, came from the tree line further away. "Hold on. Did you see something?" Hans suddenly stopped, his voice tense, eyes fixed on the darkness. A tall, shadowy figure moved between the tree trunks. "Over by the tree line?" "It's moving." "Someone there." Carl squinted, hand tightening on his rifle, but his voice had started to tremble. His heart pounded as the shadow stopped, as if looking straight at them. "No. Doesn't look human," he whispered, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Hearing the story, I recognized a familiar pattern. The off-hawker always appears where people least expect it, and it always knows how to make them feel like prey. The setting of the night stag isn't just an isolated story. In the 1980s, NATO bases in Germany were fortresses on the edge of survival. With thousands of nuclear warheads aimed at each other, every night watch was a mental ordeal. They were trained to face the enemy, but no one prepared them to face something not of this world. The shadow in the woods, with its indistinct form, was the prelude to an encounter that would change Hans and Carl forever. For Francis, a young British soldier stationed in West Germany in 1981, the Cold War meant exhausting all-night duties and relentless drills preparing for a war that never happened. We were always on alert, but nobody prepared us for what appeared in the dark. One cold full moon night changed him forever, etching a fear he never dared mention to his comrades. That night, Francis and another soldier were tasked with setting up a helicopter landing zone, HLZ, in a desolate field, about 60 miles south of Detmold. This field, often used for exercises, was familiar but tedious. They arrived late afternoon, setting up equipment like dozens of times before, with no inkling that the darkness was about to deliver something beyond imagination. Everything was boringly normal, Francis wrote, until night fell. As the silvery moonlight covered the field, the chirping of crickets mingled with the sound of helicopters arriving and departing, like giant iron dragonflies tearing through the sky. Francis and his comrades' job was to wait, observing the night landing exercises. To kill time and ward off the bone-chilling cold, they did what any true Englishman would do. Brewed hot tea, sipped it slowly, and made small talk. "What do you think about being a pilot?" Francis asked, half joking, his eyes scanning the starry sky. "Pilot? You? Dream on." His comrade, a guy named Tom, laughed. "Hey, have you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? It's great, even has Nazis getting beat up." Francis held up a hand, laughing loudly. "Don't spoil it. I'm planning to take my wife this weekend." The conversation helped them forget the loneliness, but only for a moment. As the rotor wash of the last helicopter faded into the distance, a heavy silence fell, as if the field itself was holding its breath. Around 1:30 a.m., as they eagerly awaited the final helicopter so they could pack up and leave, Tom suddenly grabbed Francis's arm, his voice trembling. "Hey, do you see that? At the edge of the woods." Francis squinted, his heart starting to race. Under the bright moonlight, a tall figure stood motionless about 80 yards away, right on the border between the field and the dark woods. Is that someone?" Francis whispered, but he knew instantly the answer wasn't that simple. The figure wasn't human. It stood upright on 2 legs, at least 8 feet tall, an extraordinary height that left both young soldiers stunned. Its eyes glowed yellow, like 2 coals smoldering in the dark, and its body shimmered strangely under the moonlight, as if covered in metallic scales or eerie silver dew. It's watching us, Tom whispered, his hand gripping his rifle but not daring to raise it. I immediately recognized the signs of the Offhawker, not just a shapeshifter but an entity that knows how to sow fear simply by its presence. The figure's silence was more terrifying than any roar. It didn't move, made no sound, just stood there, observing them like a predator assessing prey or an ancient guardian protecting its domain. God, what does it want? Francis mumbled, cold sweat running down his back despite the freezing winter night. He felt an invisible pressure, as if those burning yellow eyes were piercing his mind, exposing his deepest fears. Suddenly, the sound of the last helicopter's rotors echoed from afar, like a saving ray of hope. At that exact moment, the figure lowered itself, moving smoothly but unnaturally, like a predator shifting to all fours. In an instant, it retreated into the deep woods, vanishing into the darkness as if it had never existed. It's gone, Tom whispered, but his voice cracked, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. The Offhawker doesn't need to attack. Sometimes it just wants you to know it's there. When the helicopter left, Francis and Tom didn't say a word. They hastily packed their gear in silent panic, hands trembling as they secured the equipment straps. Climbing into the Jeep, they sped off at 60 miles per hour on the rough track, tires crunching on gravel, desperate to escape that cursed field. We don't talk about this, okay? Francis looked at Tom, his voice hoarse. Tom nodded, eyes still glued to the darkness behind them, as if afraid the figure would follow. I've never forgotten that night, even after decades. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't from this world. And I swear, Professor, sometimes I still feel those burning yellow eyes watching me, even in my dreams. Francis's story is another piece in the terrifying mosaic of the Offhawker, an entity that not only hunts prey but sows permanent fear in the minds of survivors. We never told anyone about this, Francis wrote in his letter to me, his tone haunting. In the army, you can't admit you're scared. A brave soldier, ready to face the Russians, trembling because of a shadow in the woods? No way. The ridicule would be worse than the fear, but that night left an invisible scar on his soul, a terror no taunt could erase. After that fateful night, Francis changed. He avoided any duty involving night landing zones, always finding ways to swap shifts when assigned forest patrols. The darkness wasn't the same, he confessed. I always felt something watching, waiting. Although his comrade Tom also witnessed the strange figure, they both chose silence. But their eyes held a silent understanding whenever they met. It was too real, Professor, Francis emphasized. Not a hallucination, not fatigue. It was something terrifying. Francis was familiar with German legends. I knew they had stories about werewolves, about mythical creatures in the deep forests, he wrote. But that night I felt a primal fear, like facing something that existed before humans appeared. The figure's burning yellow eyes still haunted him, flickering in his nightmares, a reminder that he had touched the boundary of a world best left untouched. I still see it, he whispered, even when I close my eyes. To me, the stories of Francis and Schaefer evoke another entity, the Skinwalker, a malevolent creature from Native American culture. Germany's Offhawker and the Skinwalker share frightening similarities. Both are shapeshifters able to become animals or humans, with glowing eyes and sharp claws. I also thought of the rake or pale crawler, thin, pale entities reported in modern accounts. They seem woven from the same demonic cloth. Skinwalkers, according to Navajo legend, are witches who forsake their humanity for supernatural power. They can transform into wolves, owls, or any predator, and often use human voices to lure victims. They don't just kill, they enjoy playing with fear, making their prey feel helpless. The parallels between Skinwalkers and Offhawker made me wonder, how could these entities half a world apart share the same malevolent nature? Perhaps, he speculated, they aren't independent at all. Perhaps they are manifestations of the same ancient darkness. This question has haunted paranormal researchers worldwide, including Lee Brickley, a British author known for his passion for investigating shape-shifting entities. In his book Skinwalkers, Brickley documents chilling stories from around the globe, from German forests to the Navajo desert. There's an invisible thread connecting these creatures, he wrote, as if they are pieces of a larger, darker mystery. Reading his book, I couldn't help but nod in agreement. Encounters like those of Francis and Schaefer are just the tip of a terrifying iceberg. On a trip to Germany seeking clues, Brickley met Stefan Richter, a man who once worked at a remote military base in Bavaria. "I didn't believe in ghosts," Stefan recounted, his voice low but trembling, "until I saw it." His story began one thick, foggy night while he was checking the security fence. A strange sound, like claws scraping on metal, made him stop. "Someone there?" he called out, but only silence answered. A heavy silence, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Hearing Stefan's story through Brickley, I recognized a familiar pattern. These entities always appear where humans are most vulnerable, during night watches in remote areas in moments of solitude. Offhacker, Skinwalker, or whatever name they bear, they don't just hunt prey. They hunt fear, and they know exactly how to make you feel like there's no escape. Stefan's story, like those of Francis and Schaefer, is a warning. In the darkness, something is always watching, and it never truly leaves. In late 2020, Stefan Richter and his small family, his wife and 2 children, unwittingly walked into a waking nightmare in the Rhineland forest, a dense woodland near Brandenburg, just miles from the bustling life of Berlin. But stepping into the forest was like entering another world, where sunlight was swallowed by the canopy and a deathly silence reigned. "I'd walked through this forest hundreds of times," Stefan told Lee Brickley, his voice still trembling at the memory, "but that day, something felt wrong, like the forest was breathing." That morning, the Richter family prepared for their usual hike, a routine that brought joy to the 2 children who saw the forest as their playground. But strangely, both kids were quiet, reserved, lacking their usual eagerness. "They kept clinging to my hand and their mothers," Stefan recounted, his gaze distant, "as if they sensed something I couldn't see. Children are often sensitive to entities like the Offhacker. They hear whispers adults ignore." Despite noticing the abnormality, Stefan and his wife decided to proceed. "Maybe they're just tired," he told himself, trying to push away the uneasy feeling. "Fresh air will do them good." But as the family ventured deeper into the Rhineland forest, the path narrowed, the dense canopy blocking the light, turning the woods into a shadowy labyrinth. A feeling of being watched, invisible but heavy, made the hairs on Stefan's neck stand up. "I can't explain it," he confessed, "but I felt like someone or something was watching us." Stefan's wife, Anna, was the first to sense the danger. In the middle of the path, she suddenly stopped, her face pale, breath coming in short gasps. "Stefan, someone's there," she whispered, eyes fixed on the dense tree line. "It's over there watching us." Stefan scanned the woods but only saw trees swaying in the wind. "Are you sure?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Maybe just an animal." But Anna's panicked eyes and the whimpering cries of the children made him unable to ignore it. "Stay here," Stefan ordered, his voice firm though his heart hammered against his ribs. He stepped towards the tree line, gripping a piece of wood he'd hastily picked up, as if it could protect him from whatever lurked there. "Anyone there?" "Show yourself," he called, but only silence answered, a suffocating silence, as if the forest was holding its breath. The children cried harder, clinging to their mother, and Anna whispered, "Stefan, don't go far. I saw it. It moved." A few minutes later, Anna screamed again, her voice breaking with fear. "It's there. I saw it clearly." She pointed to a spot deeper in the woods where a tall, motionless figure stood among the trees. Stefan squinted, and this time he saw it. A gaunt, pale form with eyes burning like embers. It didn't move, but its presence felt like an invisible blade, cutting through the air. "Oh my God," Stefan mumbled, his body freezing. Offhacker often appears to test its prey, making them feel helpless before attacking. "Get back now!" Anna screamed, pulling the children back towards the path. Stefan scrambled back towards his family, the piece of wood falling from his hand as fear overwhelmed any fighting instinct. "We're leaving right now," he ordered, his voice hoarse. The Richter family practically ran down the path, the crunch of dry leaves underfoot mixing with the children's cries. "It's still there, Stefan," Anna whispered, glancing back. The figure didn't pursue, but its burning eyes seemed to bore into their backs like a silent warning. When they finally emerged from the forest, the Richter family stood by their car, gasping for breath, backs drenched in sweat despite the cold air. "We are never going back there," Anna declared, hugging her two trembling children tightly. Stefan nodded, but the terror still clung to him. "I used to think ghost stories were just jokes," he told Brickley. "But that thing, it was real, and it knew us." The Richter family's encounter is proof that the Aufhaker doesn't just hunt soldiers, it hunts anyone who dares enter its territory. Stefan stepped a few yards forward, heart pounding, eyes straining to see into the area his wife indicated. Tree shadows danced in the wind, but then he saw it. Not an illusion, but a living entity lurking behind an ancient tree trunk. "It's there," he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady so as not to frighten the children further. But the figure, large and unnatural, made his blood run cold. The creature looked like a giant man, but its hunched, almost predatory posture radiated danger. It wore a grayish wolf pelt, the shaggy mane covering its head and back, like a Viking warrior stepping out of legend. It looked like a character from an old movie, Stefan told Lee Brickley, but his voice trailed off at the memory. But something was wrong. I felt it wasn't human. I'm familiar with the Aufhaker's tendency to use disguises to deceive, but the camouflage always reveals some abnormality. With the little courage he had left, Stefan took a few more steps, trying to get a clearer view. But a dry twig snapped underfoot, the small sound echoing like thunder in the forest's silence. "Damn it," he muttered, a chill running down his spine. The figure instantly turned, unnaturally fast, and its eyes locked onto him. "Yellow eyes, no whites, burning like hellfire," Stefan recounted, his voice trembling. "It looked at me like it knew every secret in my soul." Before Stefan's eyes, the creature transformed. The wolf pelt twitched, coming alive like a conscious entity, enveloping its body with the sickening sound of cracking and popping bones. In seconds, it became a giant wolf, mangy and black, larger than any beast Stefan had ever seen. It wasn't a wolf, he wrote, it was something that violated all laws of nature. Its burning yellow eyes glinted with malevolent intelligence, as if enjoying his fear. This was a clear sign of the Aufhaker, a shapeshifter that not only changes form but also manipulates its prey's mind. The monster roared, an inhuman sound echoing through the forest, then charged toward Stefan and his family at terrifying speed. "Run!" he yelled, turning to see his wife and children frozen, eyes wide with terror. Self-preservation kicked in. Stefan drew the hunting knife he always carried and threw it hard at the creature. "I don't know if I hit it," he recounted, but it flinched just for a second, then turned and bolted into the woods, vanishing like a ghost. Not daring to stop and retrieve the knife, Stefan rushed to embrace his wife and children, the kids' screams mingling with Anna's ragged breaths. "Get out of here now," he commanded, practically dragging his family down the path. Every step was a battle against the fear that the monster would change its mind, bursting from the shadows. "I didn't dare look back," Stefan confessed, afraid I'd see those eyes right behind me. When they escaped the forest, the daylight offered no comfort from the terror that still gripped them. Stefan's story sounds like something out of a horror novel, but Lee Brickley, an experienced researcher, believed him. After days of talking with the Richter family, Brickley recognized the deep emotional trauma in Stefan's trembling voice and haunted eyes. He wasn't lying. The memory was like an unhealed wound, and retelling it seemed to make him relive the terrifying moment. Victims of the Aufhaker don't just encounter it, they carry it with them for life. The Rhineland forest was only a 5-minute drive from the Richter's home, a disturbingly close proximity. Curious but cautious, Brickley asked Stefan to take him to the scene of the incident. Stefan hesitated, the fear still raw, but finally agreed, as if wanting to confront the monster in his mind. Under the dense canopy, they found the exact spot, and to the astonishment of both, Stefan's hunting knife lay there, hidden among dry leaves, its blade glinting like a reminder of the encounter. "It was real," Stefan whispered, his hand shaking as he picked up the knife. "And it's still somewhere in this forest. Physical evidence like the knife confirms the Offhawker isn't just legend, it's a living entity and it's waiting." Stefan's hunting knife, its stainless steel blade glinting amidst the dry leaves, bore a dark brown stain of dried blood, chilling evidence of the horrifying encounter in the Rhineland forest. "It wasn't a hallucination," Stefan whispered, his hand trembling as he picked up the knife. Lee Brickley, standing beside him, felt a cold chill run down his spine. "This could be proof of an undocumented creature," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. But neither anticipated the potential consequences of this discovery. Brickley, with his background in cryptozoology, realized the knife might hold the DNA of a mysterious creature, a golden opportunity to unlock the secrets of the Offhawker. "We have to analyze this blood," he urged Stefan, his eyes alight with scientific prospect. But Stefan hesitated, his eyes worried. "What if it's human blood? They'll think I killed someone." He clutched the knife as if it were a curse. Evidence like this is both an opportunity and a risk. The Offhawker always leaves traces, but they are rarely easy to understand. Despite concerns, they sent the blood sample to a private lab in Berlin. The technician, a young woman with sharp eyes, looked perplexed as she read the results. "I've never seen anything like this," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The DNA on the blade didn't match any animal in their comprehensive database. Not bear, not wolf, not any native German creature. "It doesn't belong to any species we know," she concluded, her eyes filled with doubt. "A creature beyond modern science. The Offhawker isn't just legend, it's real." The analysis showed the closest match, at only 96%, was to the steppe wolf Canis lupus campestris, a species found almost exclusively in Siberia and Central Asia, thousands of miles from Germany. "How is that possible?" Stefan mumbled, gripping the knife tighter. The technician emphasized that even with the steppe wolf, a 4% difference in DNA is an insurmountable gap. "This isn't an ordinary wolf," she said. "If it really appeared in Germany, we need to report it immediately." But both she and Brickley knew that a geographical explanation couldn't account for this anomaly. The test results elevated the mystery but provided no answers. Stefan and Brickley stood in the lab, facing an unidentifiable blood sample, a knife as evidence, and a story straight out of a nightmare. "I just want to forget it," Stefan whispered, his eyes haunted. Brickley nodded, but within him, the flame of curiosity burned brighter than ever. The Offhawker doesn't just leave physical traces, it leaves bewilderment, making people question their own reality. On subsequent trips, Brickley met others in Germany with similar stories, from soldiers on night watch to hikers who accidentally encountered strange figures. "This isn't an isolated case," he told me. "There's a pattern. These entities appear where people are vulnerable, and they always leave permanent fear. Each story is a piece in the terrifying puzzle of the Offhawker, an entity that seems to transcend space and time." Brickley's journey led him to Poland, where he and a local man went to meet Elsa, the man's sister. Elsa lived near the indigenous Kurai community in the White Wilderness Forest, a vast, mysterious woodland where ancient legends are still whispered around campfires. "They know about these creatures," Elsa told Brickley, her voice low but steady. "We call them Strega, but they are like the German Offhawker, shapeshifters, soul hunters." Hearing this, I recognized the terrifying similarity to Skinwalkers and other entities worldwide. Elsa spoke of a night she got lost in the forest when a gaunt, pale figure appeared among the trees. "It looked at me and I felt like it knew all my sins," she whispered, clutching a string of wooden beads. "I ran, but I heard its sound. Not footsteps, but the sound of claws scraping on the earth. Elsa's story, along with Stefan's knife, strengthened Brickley's hypothesis. These creatures don't just exist. They are part of a terrifying global network, and they are becoming bolder. The question isn't what they are, but why they are appearing now and what they want from us. In Kurai culture, creatures like the Offhawker aren't just earthly monsters. Elsa, her eyes sharp but cautious, whispered to Lee Brickley, "They believe they come from the stars descending here thousands of years ago. The Kurai view them as ancient invaders, lurking in the shadows of deep forests and desolate regions, waiting for a chance to hunt humans. They don't belong to this world," she said, her voice trembling, "and they know how to make you feel it." Elsa explained that the White Wilderness Forest where she lived is a special place, a portal where the boundaries between realities become thin. "It's like a crack," she said, "a doorway for those things to enter our world." I couldn't help but think of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, where reports of paranormal phenomena and shape-shifting creatures are also linked to mysterious portals. If true, Offhawker and Skinwalkers might be the same entity, operating through invisible doorways across the globe. Elsa's husband, an indigenous Kurai man, confirmed to Brickley, "They are one. The Skinwalker of America, the Offhawker of Germany, our Zyga. The same species, the same threat." He looked at Brickley with wary eyes. "Don't speak their names too often. They will hear." Ethan shivered reading this warning. In Navajo culture, mentioning the Skinwalker is also considered dangerous, as if the name itself is an invitation. Perhaps they grow stronger from human attention, like a form of psychic energy. Elsa stressed that the Kurai rarely share these stories with outsiders. "It's not superstition," she said, her voice firm. "We learned through the blood and tears of our ancestors. To speak of them is to invite them." Brickley nodded, feeling the weight of the warning. He remembered Stefan Richter still trembling as he recounted the encounter in the Rhineland forest. "They aren't wrong. Every time we talk about the Offhawker, we might inadvertently open a door for it. From the gloomy forests of Germany to the wilds of Poland, reports of the Offhawker and similar entities continue to surface, from civilians to military personnel. They are trained observers, but no one prepared them for something beyond reason. The testimonies of soldiers like Schaefer and Francis carry particular weight, not just for their precision, but for their sincerity. They have no reason to lie, but every reason to stay silent. German legends, from Grimm's fairy tales to local folklore, seem to hide a dark truth. The Offhawker isn't just a monster, it's a symbol of primal fear. Fear of the dark, fear of the unknown. But as reports accumulate, from Stefan's bloodied knife to Francis's shadow in the woods, are we looking at a real biological species or something larger, older, beyond our comprehension? The Offhawker's diversity makes classification challenging. It can be a giant wolf, an alluring woman, or a pale figure with sharp claws. It's not just a dog man, as some think. It's a master shapeshifter changing to suit its prey. Schaefer's experience, though potentially dismissible as a dream, raises deeper questions. Can an entity like the Offhawker invade the mind, manipulating dreams to sow fear? If so, we're facing not just a physical creature, but something capable of psychic attack. Thank you for following this story. Our world is stranger and more mysterious than we imagine. Soldiers, civilians, and researchers like Brickley are uncovering a truth. That in the darkness, things are watching, waiting, and they don't need science's permission to exist. Be careful when walking through the woods, and if you hear your name called, don't answer. Who knows? Maybe the Offhawker is listening right now. Ancient religious and mystical texts often speak of prophetic dreams, where humans receive visions from entities beyond the physical world. Dreams aren't just illusions, they are doorways, where the boundary between consciousness and the unseen realm becomes thin. Was Schaefer in his troubled sleep that night, psychically invaded by the Offhawker? If true, then his encounter wasn't just physical, but a psychic attack, leaving a permanent scar. The impact on Schaefer is undeniable. His body was exhausted, his mind haunted by the image of the pale monster with empty eyes. "I wasn't myself anymore," he wrote to me, his voice full of pain. "I know such experiences aren't rare, Entities like the Offhawker don't just hunt prey. They sow fear like a psychic parasite, clinging to their victims even after they've escaped the darkness. A recurring theme in my research is the astonishing similarity between shape-shifting creatures worldwide. The Kurai in Poland believe the Offhawker, Skinwalker, and entities like the werewolf or Aswang are all one, manifestations of the same ancient darkness. They aren't limited by geography or culture. From the deep forests of Europe to the Navajo Desert, they appear under different names but with the same malevolent nature. Are we facing a global phenomenon, a species that has walked alongside humanity since the dawn of history? The idea that the Offhawker and Skinwalker could be the same entity opens profound questions. How did similar stories arise in places thousands of miles apart? Some researchers like Lee Brickley suggest they might have extraterrestrial origins, as the Kurai hinted. But whether they came from the stars or from the darkness of the human psyche itself, they have left their mark on history. Bloody encounters, chilling legends, and witnesses who never fully recover. Reports from military personnel like Schaefer and Francis carry particular weight. They are trained to observe, to report accurately. When they speak of shadows in the woods, of glowing yellow eyes, or the sound of claws scraping in the night, we must listen. These stories aren't just anecdotes, they are evidence that the world holds mysteries beyond the grasp of modern science. This world is older than we think, and it doesn't belong solely to us. Thank you for joining me on this journey. The stories of the Offhawker, from Stefan's bloodied knife to Francis's shadow in the woods, remind us that the darkness always hides something. I hope you are not only curious, but also reflect on the limits of human understanding. Keep an open mind, but don't forget caution. When walking through the forest, listen. And if you hear your name called, don't answer. I also express gratitude to those who support my research, from readers to sponsors of projects like the Wartime Stories podcast. Your support helps us bring these stories to light. They aren't just entertainment. They are reminders that in the military, where humans are pushed to their limits, the inexplicable often finds a way in. Sending best wishes, but not without a warning. Be careful when you gaze into the darkness. It might be gazing back. Offhawker, Skinwalker, or whatever names they bear, are they truly separate entities or just pieces of a larger mystery, a darkness that has watched humanity for millennia? I will continue searching for answers, and I hope you will join me on future journeys where we confront things stranger, older, and more terrifying than our imaginations can conjure.